Let me speak about the tradition of Quranic scholarship that children are nurtured with through the Sub-Sahara. I don't specifically know what happens in Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Sudan and Chad, but I have had experience for the last 6 years living with Almajiri, young men who have left their homes after the age of puberty to study the Quran and to live through an apprenticeship similar to the Wundergeselle of Germany. Wundergeselle will become experts in carpentry and thereafter live for 7 years making a living without money involved. Almajiri have dedicated themselves to learning Quran in this format, in the Kufic script that's as old as, it precedes Islam, the Kufic script. And it came with travellers on the routes of the sub-Saharan trade, and it has been part of the society for over 800 years. The boards are made from a slab of wood, held with leather at the top here, and the hands will wear it away, and two boys will get their lesson and sit facing each other and recite what they have written, memorize it, learn every curve and line of the script, and go and visit their teacher again within a week. He will correct any errors they've made, and then it will be time to wash this off, clean the board, maybe even drink the water itself, because the ink is made from gum, from the ashes of a fire, and from water. It's organic and beneficial, and it's counted as part of the traditional medicine in the society as well. But the boys may drink that or let it soak into a particular part of the ground. When the board is dry, they commence their new lesson. They're only doing this for a few hours of the day, immediately after Fajr in the morning, and again in the evening, and committing it in their memory through the time. And it's the intensity of their study is also the obligation that we find at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when people were given 5 verses or so to memorize. And somebody took a very long time to return for another lesson. And when he was asked, what is the delay? He said, I haven't learnt to apply this lesson in my life yet. So what is written should be lived. What is written should be lived. And like any monks, the Buddhist monks and that we see through Southeast Asia and up into the Himalayas and so on, they have given part of their childhood, part of their youth for this kind of study, which includes the days of earning your own living. But it's not just the quest, a bare quest for material needs to find some food today. One of the Almajiri who I regard as a son after 6 years, I regarded him as a son sooner than that, he said to me that when he left his father's house, his father said to him, you know right from wrong. You know right from wrong. Now go and see how the people are. So an Almajiri is not just studying the Quran, he's studying his society. He's living in it as the lowliest of members, perhaps sleeping in someone's porch or doorway, maybe sleeping at the mosque, maybe even sleeping under the starlight in the street or a lane, wherever he can spread a sleeping mat if he has a sleeping mat. He will work in people's houses, doing their laundry, sweeping the courts, doing these kind of things. He will do pedicures and manicures for people. He will shine their shoes, whatever it takes. His inclination is not to be fed on this day, but to serve on this day, to find some good he can do in the world, some kindness. And if food comes with it, alhamdulillah. It's not often you will find a genuine Almajiri who is putting his hand out to be paid in money. Once his task is done, alhamdulillah, thank God, he thinks I have done some good in this day and food is coming my way, or not, alhamdulillah. So this is a tradition, as I said, 800 years old in northern Nigeria, in the city of Kano at least, which is where I have focused my time. It used to be that the society, the general society, had appreciation for the fact that the young people were dedicating a part of their youthful life to the memorization of Quran. Their scholarship was valued. As I said, when you washed the board, there was medicine to be drinking particular verses of the Quran. Even today, there are requests that perhaps the whole Quran be written and stored in bottles as it's washed off, stored in bottles so a bride can drink the entire Quran before her marriage. That's a middle class request, turning to these young boys, young men. It used to be that the middle class had houses designed in such a way that there was a porch in between the road and the garden of the house and private quarters behind. There used to be this ante-room. It had no furniture in it, and it was large enough where maybe 6 people could sleep. And those 6 people were most likely to be Almajiri, although they could be any other traveller in need of a place for the night. The internal door was shut to the garden, and after the evening prayers, anyone could sleep in there. The manners of the society, the honesty and trustworthiness that existed at that time was high. And in return, those people who slept there might do some work for the house, to carry water to it, to do the washing, to sweep or whatever. And maybe there was food involved or not, but it was a safe place to sleep. Even the architecture has changed now. People would like to convert their zodi, this ante-room, they would like to convert it into a carport for their car, a garage for their motorcycles. They would like to exploit it as a shop or a business. And then the wealthier have moved out of the city and make large compounds and put gates and high walls and exclude the traveller and exclude the young scholar, and have turned many of them now into a class of people who are really struggling to earn a living. And yet those who have genuinely come to study Quran continue. They wash the cars instead. They are washing soccer uniforms. They're adjusting the satellite dishes of the wealthy who have their large screen plasma televisions. So life has become harder for them. There's also the other aspect of it, that people are sending younger and younger children into the city saying they are Almajiri, when a child of 7 should be with his father, and the father has a responsibility to teach his children from the age of 7 to the age of 10 and ensure that that child knows his basic deen. He knows how to do his ablution, he knows how to pray 5 times a day, he's probably memorized 1 juz of the Quran in the care of his father, and having reached maturity he can then undertake a personal choice to go and study the Quran. The exploitation is happening when someone takes a child of 4 or 5 into the city and says, you're a student of Quran. And a man with a beard will say, yes, he will be my student, but he becomes a student of beggary. And the man who has the beard is saying, you'll pay me 100 naira a week, which is about 50p. And you'll have a squad of young boys going with begging bowls. And so the tradition has been corrupted. And it is in this context now, in the 21st century, where this fraudulent pretense at Islamic education is being compounded by men in the city who exploit the children and their ignorant parents, and the parents of the rural areas who, although they can work 15-hour days, 12 months of the year, cannot eke out a living out of their soil, are discarding their children in the hope that they will gain something from their city experience. This part of northern Nigerian culture must change. The children deserve much more than that. The men who are pretending to be teachers need to be exposed, and current legal systems allow for them to be arrested, and the parents themselves need some education and understanding that you cannot send your child for an Islamic education if you have not fulfilled your own Islamic responsibilities as parents in those years before puberty. So there is a call to ban these schools that have existed 800 years they have existed. 800 years they have granted literacy to the poorest of people and to the kings and princes. This font was used to write the native languages prior to the introduction of the Roman alphabet in the area a century ago. And at the same time as Lord Lovatt, who consolidated northern and southern Nigerian protectorates and called it one country, he outlawed the use of this script in writing the mother tongue and made the region illiterate overnight, officially illiterate. They can now not even read their mother tongue because they're required to write it in the Roman alphabet, and instead of writing from left to right, they must write from right to left. Lord Lovatt established some schools, but only enough for the elite in northern Nigeria. In southern Nigeria, there were schools where people were trained in a curriculum that prepared them to be in the lower echelons of the civil service, to work as surveyors and accountants for tax departments, and not to hold responsibility. The curriculum is largely unchanged. Even the furniture in most government schools looks like it's out of a Charles Dickens novel. Children are crammed into little benches and forms and in darkened rooms, the shape of classrooms with not one learning resource except a piece of chalk and a teacher who is often holding a whip in their hand, and gathered in numbers as large as 150 to one teacher. This is the alternative education system that colonialism and the post-colonial world has offered the poor. I've seen great benefits, great lessons to be learned, and the character building that comes with this discipline. Character building that comes in these lessons. Character building that comes through the resourcefulness that the boys have to use while still operating with a high moral and ethical code. And after 7 years they will graduate, and that's the point where they pay their mala, not with money from their own hand, but because this is a day when their father will slaughter a ram, and the malam will get the skin, and the malam receives the meat. And it will be a day when the father brings new clothing for the malam and his family, and it will be a day when the community gathers around this graduating child. Oh, he's a young man by then. He's a young man when he started, and now he's maybe 19, 22. This is the day when the community are showering him with money, and the notes fall onto a mat, and the money is collected, and this is the income for the malam. So it's only through a malam graduating his pupils that he actually gets paid. Not in the teaching, not in the day-to-day lessons. The ones he is teaching are not the ones who are paying him. His former students are the ones who come back and pay him in food and kindness and care, bring him a sack of rice, bring him sets of clothing for his family, will pay perhaps for a scholarship for his own children to attend a private school to get other understanding. So the boys I met, I keep saying boys, they were already 14, 15 years of age, back in 2012, were studying Quran. This was the script that they learnt. They sat on the porch of my house with their handmade ink, and they used their handmade pen, and they would put their vertical lines on here and then their horizontal, and come back and put the diacritical marks to show what the vowels were, and work their way across, holding the boards across their laps, sitting in whatever configuration they felt like, as groups of 6 or 8 or 2 or alone, holding the pages of the Quran that they were copying. Malam has got his Quran in single pages so they can take their own lesson, and he has his lesson and he has his, and sitting and writing. Stretched with their legs out sometimes cross-legged, but arranging themselves and being able to move to be held comfortable and to set their work. No one was supervising them. No one was watching over them. This was a pleasant, leisurely part of Sundays, was for them to be writing their lesson again. and wash it and write it again, and wash it and write it again until the time had come to put it and recite it, and to stack it in their malam's room when they were not using it. All the boards stacked up so that each one knows his own lesson. We didn't even have a language in common to talk to each other at that time, although one boy had an English Hausa dictionary and some experience with speaking with foreigners. And he was our intermediary. We came to know each other very well. And the people I was working with at the time in more comfortable classes said, lock your door, don't let them in, they carry knives in their trousers, they will cut your throat, don't let them know there's any milk powder in the pantry, they will steal it, you can't trust them, you can't rely on them, they will do this and they will do that, you will find you're overrun, they're like rats, you must be careful of them. They've only learned the Quran like parrots, they have no knowledge of what it means, they don't even know what these letters are. We began our English lessons by reading Surat al-Yusuf together. I had the English, we had the modern Arabic script as a partway script that took them to this, and ayah by ayah, verse by verse, we would read it in Arabic, English, Arabic in two fonts, the one that was in the Quran that I had, the one in Kufic that they knew. Then they would translate it into Hausa and agree amongst themselves what it meant. And from there, with the dictionary, translate to me in English. Their translations of the verses matched the translations that were in my bilingual Quran. And I was told these children are basically illiterate parrots. I went on, we discussed hadith, we talked about the Sahabas, we understood the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Not only did they have the knowledge of scholars, they were living exemplars of the Sahabas' lives and the character that we should be polishing in our own behavior. There were times when I would find them disturbed by something or another, and they would never mention the name of the person who had bothered them. They didn't even like to talk about the problem caused by another person because it was something they knew had blessing in it for them, and therefore why be distressed? They would see from time to time that I was distressed. As a Western woman, of course you have all these sense of privilege that you have a right to be distressed about this or that, or it's a concern of yours to worry about money or some issue. They could see I would be experiencing some anxiety where they rarely displayed any anxiety. And one of them gave me counsel, this boy of 15. He said to me, Ma, when we are facing this situation as Almajiri, we get excited. We get excited because we are promised that in every hardship there is relief, and that relief is promised to you. There is no burden greater than you can bear, and that the relief that is coming is something wonderful. You can't even imagine what it is or where it will come from, but it's coming. And you should feel that sense of anticipation, Ma, that you are going to receive this relief and it will be revealed to you. And ever since that time, I am greatly relieved, because even at a time of grief or mourning or loss or hardship or doubt or fear, I also feel that sense that this boy had told me, 15 years old, as calm as still waters and running just as deep. He counselled me. There was a time when we had very little money between us. The employment I had had to begin with, the contract had ended and I was still in the country with no income, except for people who were kind enough to realize that here was this house where these boys were able to live and study Quran. We were having one meal a day. At night sometimes there was hunger, and I hadn't experienced hunger. These boys knew hunger. They were grateful for the one meal they were getting. I said, what do we do on these nights when we are hungry? They said, drink water. We drink water, fill your belly with water. And it's true. Hunger can be dispelled in that way. And they knew that if water didn't satisfy, then we can go the path of the Prophet ﷺ and his friend Abu Bakr al-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and tie a rock against our belly to survive the pangs of hunger. They've taught me much. Their knowledge of the city as Almajiri was such that they could come to me and say, Ma, there's a child at the end of the road, he has blood in his stool, his mother is anxious about the situation, they can't afford the fees for the clinical tests. On my Facebook page I would let people know, isn't this sad, for the sake of $100 this little boy has this medical condition, his mother can't find consolation. If it was my own child, I would pay the $100. And a friend said, I'll pay. She sent the money through, I went and collected it, and we were able to attend to that boy. The Almajiri who lived with me came and said, Ma, there's a school that would like to meet you. They took me off after Maghrib, so it's after sunset I'm going to a school. I thought, what school? I haven't seen the building. What is this? What school is operating after 5? Because I had been told by the UN statistics and by national statistics and by the middle class that the poor are out of school, that we have the worst figures for out of school children, you know, bottom 10 in the world out of school. The reason that they get counted as out of school is because the counters are counting during the daytime. They're counting between 9 and 3. The children of the poor cannot be at school between 9 and 3. They have tasks to do as part of the economic unit of their family. But after sunset, they can gather. 500 of them gathered in a lane. I could hear their voices. And then a generator started, and the lights spluttered into view, and the sound roared over it, and they were gathered in small learning circles. 500 children gathered in a lane that during the day is used for commerce, but at night people have pulled out mats and put them onto the concrete and over the ditches and drains. They're allowing the Saudi in the front room of their house to have another group, another group, another group. The principal of this de facto school took me from class to class. It was not even 100 meters to walk, but here were these groups, children packed like sardines with each other, being taught by voluntary teachers in the night, with the fumes of the generator and the noise of the generator and the little weak light that could shine down on what they were holding as text, and learn about the world. And it operated for 2 hours, and the principal said to me, you know, we have a problem with paying for the fuel for the generator. And I thought, I don't want to be any part of paying for fossil fuels to be used in this way, and it's detrimental to the community to have this deafening noise and this horrible air. But I thought there must be something we can do with solar power. So I dashed home, got on the internet, found out who was a local solar supplier. I contacted him and I asked him, please, what would be the quote for putting solar into this area? And I shared that story on Facebook with my friends, and again, friends responded. One family had a whip around and paid for the solar lighting that's guaranteed for 25 years, and now that lane, that school in that lane, operates under the starlight with solar power, and the sweet voices of the children and their lessons is what dominates that neighborhood in the night. Things snowballed. The Almajiri were my eyes and ears in the city, bringing me stories, and I shared the stories through my networks, and people responded. And by 2015, when the insurgency of Boko Haram had really taken its toll on Borno, and 2.5 million people had been displaced, and many of them had come west 500 kilometers by foot or loaded like cattle on truck, they came to the city of Kano, and we could not ignore their needs. We met them on the days when they arrived. The first encounter I had with displaced people was to enter a small home where 165 people had climbed off a truck as relatives of this homeowner. There was not room for them all to sit. The men and boys slept on the street outside. Inside the house, and the house was made out of rice sacks and plastic bags as roofs and walls within an adobe compound. On the one bed that I could see was a young woman who had a bullet hole through her calf muscle, and the bullet had triggered her labour. And in the back of that truck, making that journey, she had delivered a child she held in her arms prematurely. You cannot see such things. To kiss that woman's hand, to be with her in the first 24 hours of her birth, you cannot see such things and walk away from them. I had no wealth of my own except for things that we disregard even as being wealth in the West. I had an interconnection, I had data, I had the equipment, I had a camera. I had to share this story with the people I love, knowing that their hearts are also good. I didn't even know how to respond. I know they needed food, so the next day money arrived that night. We had enough money to buy 3 days of food for them, and in the 3 days I said, Inshallah, we will be back. By the grace of God, we will be back. Look around this neighborhood and see if there are rooms to rent. Look around this neighborhood and see what business enterprise you can undertake. Set yourselves up. We came back in 3 days, and they had found rooms that we could rent. I can't even do the conversions at the moment. About £20 for 6 months' rent. About £20 to embark upon a business, street trading or whatever, and about £10 to buy a sleeping mat, a water bucket and a cooking pot, and allow them to integrate into the impoverished society that they had joined, but it was safe and it was free of violence. We ended up going further, and more than 500 families were helped in this way. And we realized as we were working, not with our money, but with our time and with our counsel, we realized that the host communities were equally impoverished. They may not have seen the violence, but now the ones that we had assisted into business and accommodation were wealthier than their hosts. So we began a mission of attending to their hosts. The poor are genius. Loans of £20 meant that they would get a £2 return every day. That was double their ordinary income. Every day they were making 10% of the investment. 10%. I hear that there are businesses, huge corporations that will say we made such and such a profit this year. Such and such a profit might be 25%. You don't hear that they had a 10% profit every day. And they, having been accustomed to living off £1 a day, they could spend £1.50 on food and still have 50p as profit, which they can then invest back in the business and let the business grow, and the businesses would grow phenomenally. So a man cooking yam in the morning, as he's cooked the yam at this time of the day, he's giving his son the profit, go and buy me another yam. You can start with one yam, deep fried, chopped up and deep fried, and as the profit is coming in, go and buy another yam, go and buy another yam, and he's cooked in the day, I don't know how many yams, but in the week he had cooked enough yams to turn his business into fish. And fish was much more expensive in capital, but much more beneficial in profit. In another 2 weeks, he had the cabinet and he had the table, and he was beyond being a street trader. He was now into serious business. We have seen people move up through 2 years of work into owning a restaurant and operating a restaurant and having their kids in secondary school from the gutters, from degradation and absolute poverty. And they needed such little to start with. £50 transformed their lives. I've learned a lot about economics in these circumstances. And as we lived and worked in these neighbourhoods, we came to know of the orphans. Hundreds of thousands of orphans in northern Nigeria. Double orphans, those who watched their fathers slaughtered, they watched their homes burnt. They have lived 2 or 3 years in the displaced people's camps with 17,000 other people, cheek by jowl, stuffed into a secondary school. Food supplies disappearing, a diet of rice and oil, and boredom. And we gather them in groups, family groups. Bring your siblings. Let us join together and let's make some safe haven where you can be educated, you can be fed, you can be clothed, you can be housed, you can have gardens, you can have animals, and you can have a life. And these are projects now that we've put under the umbrella called Lovatt Foundation. I have to give you my card, because a pound makes a difference. And we live on a pound a day ourselves. Those of us who are working on these projects, and it's our honour to enable the people of goodwill in the West, like those very first people who helped us with the child blood in his stool, the school that needed solar to operate. These very first people have given us the enormous pleasure of continuing to work in communities of great need, who have at their hand the Kufic script that was originally used for writing the Quran. It lives, they live, and it's just the simple.
لا